Back in Syria, Izzat was an architect who earned 1,500 euros per month. But here in Jordan, this father of 7 is not allowed to work.
We have to work it out with 3 euros a day, bread, a small amount of vegetables, nothing more.
This year, for 500,000 refugees, the holy month of Ramadan brings little to celebrate. Like Izzat, they have just found out that their food assistance is about to be cut.
Yes, they sent us text messages.
I also received it. I have the message on my phone. Let me read it to you. We are sorry to inform you that for this month of August, the World Food Programme doesn't have enough funds to continue supporting Syrian refugees who live outside the camps.
Neglected by the international community, many of them now turn to Islamic charities, like this one, Al-Kitab wal-Sunnah, founded by Salafis, a radical interpretation of Islam. The director hands over the food, a way to remind the refugees of the key role played by his charity.
We received no assistance from the UN.
In any case, they will cut aid for everyone.
All of it? For everyone?
Yes, everyone. We heard they were going to stop it all because they have no money left.
But for this organization, funding is not an issue. The director proudly shows us the food boxes he's distributing to thousands of Syrian families.
Arabs and the Muslim community have been very keen on helping Syrian refugees. But this year I feared aid would diminish, and that is why I launched a campaign on my Facebook and Twitter accounts to let people know some families only have water and dates to break their fast.
Last year, Saudi Arabia and Qatar gave more than 40 million euros to this organization. In the UN-run Zaatari refugee camp, the charity then built mosques and taught the Quran from the youngest age. Often put on the spot by foreign workers for being radical, the charity has now left the camp. But the director wants to show us that funds come all the way from Europe, where the main donor is French.
This is Baraka. They're from France.
Baraka City, an Islamic organization closely monitored by the French intelligence. But that's not an issue for him.
They've funded many projects for iftar meals and helping people who fast. They've also donated sheep for the Syrian refugees.
Saudi Arabia's royal family has just pledged 30 billion euros to Islamic charities like this one. Nothing for the UN. Even though they need 60 million euros to feed all the Syrian refugees in Jordan until the end of this year.
The UN and the Western NGOs have a well-established coordination mechanism. We have so far not managed very well to include the Gulf organizations into that coordination. And sometimes the humanitarian perspective and the religious perspective is not necessarily the same.
In this mosque, close to the Syrian border, 300 refugees will be breaking their fast thanks to a Saudi donor. These men say they have barely seen a Western organization since they found refuge in this small village 3 years ago.
Instead of hiring 200 people, the UN should give all that money to the poor. Every single employee is paid the equivalent of 2,600 euros, and honestly, they just sit in their offices. They've got big cars, villas, while we sit here and suffer.
As the Syrian conflict drags on, refugees are losing faith in the United Nations. They question the organization's role as they see their situation worsen by the day.
Well, for more on this, let's bring in our guest, Julien Théron, who's an expert on conflicts at the University of Versailles. Thank you very much for being with us on France 24. We've seen in that report that Islamic charities are considered radical. Concretely, though, why are they seen as a threat when they're actually helping fellow Muslims?
Well, that's the point. It's not Islamic charities, it's Islamists' charities, meaning that they try to bring people in a radical version of Islam, which is absolutely does not belong, actually, with the Syrian culture, which is not at all radical, usually speaking, but it's more and more on two sides. The first one is the conflict side, and the other one is the refugee side, because there's no sufficient food and money actually brought to the UN by donors.
But how do you know that all these charities are radical? Some of them might be less radical, and maybe they could work with Western NGOs.
And some do, actually. For instance, the Red Crescent work pretty well. But the point is that those kind of small NGOs, which are way more, how could I say, able to distribute some small amount of food or this kind of things, when the UN is actually a big machine with a lot of different agencies working together and so on, and needing the authorization of the states and so on. So it's very diplomatic issues, when the small charities are actually easier to act on the field like that.
You've just said that the UN is a big machine. How come Western NGOs are running out of cash? How come now they have to cut food coupons?
So there's two things, but they actually work together. It's the UN and the Western NGOs, so they work together. But the point is that there's 12 million of internally displaced persons inside Syria, and there's more than 4 million outside Syria, meaning that we need $8.5 billion per year to afford food and medics and so on. And the UNHCR actually can count on more than approximately half this sum. So there's trouble, there's lack of money.
There is a lack of money. They didn't receive the funds that they needed to help those in need. Why do you think that is? Do you feel that the war in Syria is no longer attracting attention?
Well, it does, but it attracts attention regarding to the Islamic State and not enough the situation of refugees. So we need to do more. And why we don't give more money for that? It's because the UN is just the sum of all the countries in the world. It's what we call the international community. So it means that all the countries should give more to them. And some have different priorities and some have different strategies regarding to the region, like your report said.
You were based in Beirut for 2 years. You've seen how refugee camps there worked. Beirut, obviously, they've welcomed many Syrian refugees. Can you tell us how things work there?
So, well, I was actually based in Beirut before the Syrian war, but I went back over there. It's very difficult in Lebanon, actually. The situation is that regarding to the sensitive situation with Palestinian refugees, the Lebanese authorities don't want to create huge camps like in Jordan, for instance. So the population is diffused with the population, with the Lebanese population, and it works pretty well until now. But there's difficulties with the local population regarding to jobs even, or access to medics or whatever. I mean, it's a tense situation, so it can't stay a very long time for now, and the Lebanese population does a lot for them, and the NGOs, local NGOs and the UN do a lot. But the point is that this situation can remain for long.
Julien Théron, thank you very much for your analysis.